The moment Michael stepped into the small roadside diner that stormy evening, he felt something was wrong. Not because of the flickering neon sign outside or the eerie silence that washed over the place despite the dinner rush. It was the look in the waitress's eyes, frantic, distant, and desperate, like someone silently screaming for help. Her smile trembled as she tried to greet customers. Her hands shook when she carried plates. And when she turned away, Michael caught the unmistakable shimmer of tears clinging to her lashes. He had seen that look before, in the mirror, during the hardest nights after his wife died, when he had no choice but to pretend he was okay for the sake of his son. But this wasn't grief. This was fear. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and looking out for others, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Michael placed his hand gently on his son Jacob's shoulder and walked to a booth near the back. He wanted a clear view of the room, old habit from the years when he had to be both mom and dad, protector and provider. The diner was buzzing with the low hum of people unwinding after long workdays. But every so often, the air would shift, tightening like a pulled string, whenever a man sitting near the counter barked commands toward the waitress. His tone was sharp, belittling, dripping with a cruel satisfaction that only someone used to power, and abusing it, could wield. Michael noticed the first sign the waitress was being harassed when she flinched, really flinched, just from the man calling her name. It wasn't normal. It wasn't casual. Her whole body stiffened before she composed herself and hurried to him. The second sign came when she approached his table later. He saw the red marks on her wrist, fresh and angry, as though someone had gripped her far too tightly. She quickly tugged her sleeve down when she realized he saw them. The third sign appeared when she spilled water on her apron after hearing footsteps behind her, and her breath caught like she was bracing for a blow. The fourth sign was the way other employees avoided looking at her, the way they pretended not to notice her discomfort, stepping around the situation as if it were a fragile landmine. And the fifth, perhaps the most telling, was the hopeless resignation in her eyes every time the man snapped his fingers at her. Michael felt his chest tighten. He had been here before, not with a partner, but with a sister who had once been trapped in a toxic, manipulative relationship. He had seen the signs then, too, and he had stayed silent. That silence had cost her years of rebuilding her spirit. He refused to repeat that mistake. He watched as the waitress approached again, forcing a smile as she asked if Jacob wanted more fries. Michael caught her voice cracking slightly, the edges strained, as though every word was a weight she had to push through. Michael gave his son a small nod, silently signaling him to be still and observant. At 12, Jacob was remarkably intuitive. Losing his mother early had made him grow up fast. He tilted his head, glancing between the waitress and the man at the counter, and Michael knew his son saw the tension too.
As the waitress walked away, Michael couldn't shake the image of her shaking hands. She looked young, early 20s maybe, too young to be carrying that kind of fear. The storm outside intensified, thunder rumbling as rain lashed against the windows. Inside, a different kind of storm brewed, quieter, but far more dangerous. Michael noticed the man getting more impatient, more irritated. Every time the waitress wasn't instantly at his side, his jaw clenched, and he glared at her with an unsettling intensity. The diner staff kept avoiding him, pretending everything was normal. But Michael knew the truth. Fear is loud, even in silence. When the waitress accidentally dropped a fork near the man, she froze, waiting for his reaction. Michael watched the color drain from her face as the man grabbed her arm harshly. She whispered something too quietly for Michael to hear, but her eyes darted around the room, pleading with anyone to intervene. No one did. Michael felt his pulse quicken, a protective instinct rising in him like a tide. He didn't know her, didn't know her story, but he knew that look. Jacob looked at him, sensing his father's shift in energy. Michael gave him a reassuring nod, silently telling him everything would be okay. The man finally released her arm and she stumbled slightly before regaining her balance. Michael clenched his jaw. This wasn't just rude behavior. This was control. This was intimidation. And everyone was pretending it wasn't happening. He excused himself from the booth, pretending to go wash his hands, but instead he slowed near the counter, pretending to check the pastry display while listening closely to the man berating the waitress. She stood stiffly, her head slightly bowed, shoulders trembling. Michael took a mental note of the man's arrogance, his entitlement. Abusers usually believed themselves untouchable, but he wasn't going to let this one walk all over her. Returning to the booth, Michael felt that familiar burn in his chest, the one he used to feel when defending his son from cruel comments after his wife died, the same fire he felt when protecting his sister years ago. That fire was the reason he couldn't stay silent. Not now. Not ever again. An idea formed in his mind, and he waited patiently, timing everything with the precision of someone who had learned that timing saves people more than brute force ever could. The waitress returned once more to drop off their check, her smile trembling again. Michael gently touched her hand for just a second, just long enough to speak softly and intentionally. He told her she didn't deserve whatever was happening. Her eyes widened, the dam of composure threatening to break. But before she could speak, the man at the counter barked her name again, louder this time. She jumped back instinctively, nearly spilling the remaining water on the table. Apologizing profusely, she rushed away. Michael watched as she approached the man, but this time something shifted. Her face carried a flicker of something, maybe hope, maybe courage triggered by a stranger acknowledging her pain. Sometimes one kind moment is a match that lights a fire of bravery. The man leaned close to her, hissing something that made her swallow hard. She gave a quick glance toward Michael, like she was silently pleading for him not to intervene, but also begging him not to leave her alone. It was a look of someone torn between fear of consequences and fear of silence. Michael had seen enough. He stood abruptly, startling Jacob. He told his son to stay put and trust him. Jacob nodded, gripping the edge of the table. Michael stepped toward the counter. The diner quieted. Conversations died mid-sentence. The storm outside howled, pressing against the windows like it wanted in. The man at the counter didn't see him approaching at first, but when he finally sensed someone standing beside him, he turned with annoyance etched on his face. He looked at Michael as though Michael was just another inconvenience to be stomped out. Michael met his glare with calm, steady resolve. He didn't raise his voice or puff out his chest. He simply stood there, his presence unshaken, his gaze determined. It wasn't aggression. It was protection. The waitress's breath hitched. She stepped back slightly, her eyes darting nervously between the two men.
Michael spoke quietly, but his voice carried the weight of unspoken stories. He said he had seen everything: the grip on her arm, the fear in her eyes, the way she recoiled when spoken to. He said that no one deserved to be treated that way, no matter the circumstances. The man scoffed, brushing him off with a dismissive wave. He claimed she was dramatic, clumsy, incompetent. He said she needed discipline, and people like Michael should mind their own business. Michael didn't flinch. Years of grief and responsibility had carved a strength into him that this man couldn't even fathom. He leaned slightly closer, his voice low but powerful, telling the man that harming her in any way would no longer go unnoticed. He told him the police were already on their way, whether or not they actually were. He didn't break eye contact, didn't blink. The man's confidence wavered just for a second, but enough.
Abusers thrive in shadows, in silence, in secrecy. Michael had dragged everything into the light. The waitress's breathing became uneven, overwhelmed but also relieved. A tear slid down her cheek before she quickly wiped it away. The man muttered something under his breath, grabbed his coat, and stormed out of the diner, cursing as he pushed through the glass door into the rain. For a moment, the diner was silent again. No one spoke. No one moved. Then the waitress collapsed into a chair, covering her face with her hands as quiet sobs escaped her. She had held herself together for so long that the sudden release of tension broke her completely. Michael stepped closer, giving her space but staying near enough that she knew she wasn't alone. Eventually, she lifted her head, eyes red but grateful. She whispered that the man was her ex-boyfriend, someone who refused to let her go, someone who showed up at her job to torment her, knowing she couldn't react without risking her position. She admitted she had been terrified of him for months. Michael listened, letting her unravel the story piece by piece. He didn't interrupt, he didn't rush her. He simply offered presence, something she hadn't had in a long time. She confessed she had been too afraid to tell anyone, fearing judgment, fearing consequences, fearing escalation. But hearing someone say she didn't deserve it, that had cracked something inside her. She finally realized how trapped she had been. Michael offered help, not as a savior, but as someone who believed in her strength. He helped her call a local women's support center. The manager of the diner who had overheard finally stepped in and apologized for not recognizing the signs earlier. The staff, previously too scared to get involved, apologized too. Jacob approached quietly, standing beside his father. The waitress smiled softly at him, thanking him for loaning his brave dad for a moment. The storm outside began to calm as the chaos inside settled. The air felt lighter, breathing was easier, and for the first time in months, the waitress felt safe. She told Michael that his intervention didn't just stop the harassment. It reminded her that there were good people still in the world, people who cared, people who didn't stay silent. Michael nodded, telling her that silence can be the loudest form of harm. And sometimes all someone needs is one voice saying, "This isn't right." She thanked him again, tears streaming freely now, not from fear, but from relief. And just as they were about to leave, she asked how he recognized the signs so quickly. Michael paused, looking down at Jacob before answering softly. He said he had learned the hard way that silence hurts more than confrontation ever could. He said he had ignored signs once and vowed never to do so again. Helping her wasn't just instinct, it was redemption. Jacob wrapped his arms around his dad's waist, hugging him tightly, proud of the man who protected people even when he didn't have to. As Michael and Jacob stepped outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle, the world feeling washed clean. The waitress watched from the doorway, holding a warm cup of coffee with steady hands, no longer trembling. She knew her journey wasn't over, but she also knew she wasn't walking it alone anymore. Someone had seen her pain. Someone had spoken up, and that changed everything. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of the power of courage and compassion, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement truly helps spread more stories that inspire hope and humanity. Before you go, leave a comment below. What would you have done if you were in Michael's shoes? Thank you for watching and for believing in kindness.